Welcome to CourseCast. Today I'm joined by Ari and Alexei, two biochemists at the University of Oxford. We're going to be talking through their admissions experiences, what the course is like, and just generally having a good chat about biochemistry and what that might entail when you're studying at university. So, firstly, could you both introduce yourselves? Don't mind who goes first. But okay, Alexei, you
Okay.
go
I'll go
first.
first. I'm Alexei. I'm a second year biochemist at Worcester College. Yeah.
Cool, nice.
So I'm Ari. I'm a first year studying biochemistry at St Hilda's, and I'm from Cardiff originally.
Nice one, nice one. And so why did you guys go for biochemistry? Let's go Ari first because I know Alexi's got an interesting story to tell about this. But why biochemistry?
Well, I actually chose biochemistry for a bit of a weird reason. Since I've been small, my mum's been chronically unwell with Crohn's disease, and I've kind of seen how illness can impact your life, and it's not fun to say the least. So from a young age, I was very interested in medicine, science, and then since I've grown older, I looked a little bit more into the science, the mechanisms behind illness, the mechanisms behind medicine, and decided that that was what I wanted to go into. Looked at the courses, there was biology, biochem, biomed, and I think it was through my EPQ project on the extent to which THC can affect your sleep architecture that I decided that biochemistry was for me. Because that was a lot of biochemistry in there.
Yeah, we'll talk about like the differences between biomedicine and biochemistry because I don't know what they are. But it'll be interesting to find out. But no, that's a really interesting story and like it's more almost a vocational thing for you then, as opposed to just, oh, it's interesting, I've looked it on the UCAS website.
Yeah, no, it was definitely, I had a reason to be doing biochemistry.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, it's fascinating. I want to do biochemistry for the sake of biochem, but there is definitely an underlying theme of I want to help people through
Yeah,
drug development.
that's awesome. Cool. And then Alexi, so how did you end up doing biochem?
So I actually originally applied for medicine, in sixth form, and then I was like gonna go to med school, was like fully set on it, and then I think I just realized that I didn't want to do clinical work. It just wasn't like I did some work experience, wasn't for me. I was always more interested in the molecular side of things. Did a gap year, changed completely, just applied for a different course completely. So I applied for law at Oxford, started doing law here, and then realized that I just missed STEM basically. I wanted to go back to it and do it for a bit longer. I was aware of like the conversion course, so I'm still kind of looking at doing a career in law, maybe
Okay.
looking at like intellectual property. But I just thought, why not just study something that I'm really interested in? Yeah, and obviously kind of through like the medicine kind of work experience and like all the preparation and reading I did for that, I think the kind of biochemistry element was what was most interesting to me and the actual way that things work on a molecular scale rather than clinical. So I think that's why when I was switching, I was kind of like, I didn't, obviously I couldn't choose to switch into anything, but I
Yeah.
kind of had a thought about which courses I'd be interested in and biochemistry. It was never like a big conflict for me. Like I knew that that was my second choice and what I
Okay.
wanted to do.
Cool. And how was that kind of switching over? Because you'd already missed like weeks and weeks of biochemistry. Was it like a real struggle to catch up, or
I
not so
think,
bad?
yeah, so I missed about 5 weeks of content, which is a lot
Yeah.
here, because
Yeah, it's a
especially
lot.
because for us, like in first year, and I know we'll talk more about like the structure later, but because first year is just basically 2 terms and then revision, it was basically like over a quarter of the content. But I think over Christmas, I just basically watched all the lectures and caught up. Like it wasn't that bad. And I had like supportive tutors as well. So
That's
if I
good.
had questions, I could just go. I think I had a couple of like catch-up sessions in certain areas with my tutors as well, just to get me kind of up to speed on the more difficult topic.
That's good that they kind of eased the transition or whatever. Yeah, and then Ari, I want to hear a bit more about your EPQ because you've
Okay.
told me that it was almost went a bit viral, and I'm interested to hear about that.
Yeah, no, it did go a little bit crazy on the news. So essentially, in my old sixth form, I did an EPQ on the effect of cannabis on your sleep and how it can apply to medicine. And since my parents have opened the first and only cannabis clinic in Wales, it kind of tied together as this whole family thing. My college caught wind of that and said, "One second, we want to write an article on you." So I did a quick interview, spoke about my science, spoke about my family, and they published that on results day. And then another news outlet caught wind of that, Wales Online. They did an interview with me. published it a few days after results day, and it just went absolutely crazy on what is it like Independent, BBC. I think it even got into somewhere in New Zealand as well.
What? Crazy.
No,
Wow.
it was absolutely insane. But yeah, it was an experience doing interviews and then seeing it blow up and then just going, oh my God.
Yeah. So did you do any more interviews about your EBQ after the first one with your college, or was it literally just took the stuff you said to your college and then it just went like crazy like from there?
No, I did two interviews. The first one with the college, which was more focused on the actual research on my
Yeah.
EPQ, because there's not actually all that much research. It's very limited, very small. So they wanted to hear a lot about that. Whereas the second interview wanted to hear more about my family life with my mum being unwell, with how we set up the clinic, and how my aspirations tied into that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I guess you can really see the story of why you came to biochemistry. Um, Yeah, nice one. And then I wanted to pick on the research that you mentioned with your EPQ because it sounds like you were almost discovering some new stuff. And I know that biochemistry, like especially at Oxford, they've got quite a strong research department or whatever. So is that something either of you are thinking about doing like in the longer term, or is it just like I don't know, what else do you do with biochemistry apart from discover new medicine? Like what else is there?
Well, like as Alexi mentioned, you can also go into patent law and everything,
Okay,
but I'm very much so interested in research. And one of the main things that helped with my EPQ was I actually contacted an Oxford professor who
okay,
specialised in this type
cool,
of science. So I think in a term or two's time, I'm probably going to meet up and have, the coffee chat networking. But that's
nice.
slightly beside the point. What else can you do with biochemistry? Well, you could go into writing, where you can get all the information, all the data online, and then synthesize it, which was basically what my EPQ
Right,
was,
yeah.
since you can't exactly administer controlled drugs as a 16-year-old to a
Yeah,
group of
no,
unwell people.
unfortunately, yeah.
Ethics.
Yeah,
I
But
think
yeah.
generally just like in research, like biochemical research is really, really broad. So like I think people automatically probably think about like medicine and kind of drug development, which is a big part of it, but there's also things like bioinformatics, like genome-wide studies. So I think there's kind of like different levels you can look at things. So right from the kind of looking at populations, looking at diseases, all the way down to very like specific molecular interactions. So I think it's just very broad, and something that's good about the course here is that in our fourth year we do a research project.
right,
So you
cool.
essentially just join a group at the university, or I think it can also be outside the university or even abroad. So like basically, if you've got a kind of research interest that the university doesn't do, then you can ask to go elsewhere, and you just join a group. I think you do like a 20-week research
Okay,
project.
so it's pretty serious then.
Yeah, you can get like people have got publications in their master's year,
Wow,
so it's a
awesome.
really good opportunity. And so like I think in first year, like you get a chance to like visit one of the labs. So I visited some fourth years that were in a lab that like looked at Drosophila. So they
Okay, well,
had
I don't know
like
what it's like.
that's flies.
Flies,
So they
okay.
have all these like test tubes with flies in. They talked about like the different experiments they do. Flies are very like genetically tractable organisms. So
What does that mean?
basically, when you put mutations in a fly, it's very easy to track them.
Okay, got it.
So like there's some like classic mutations like vestigial wings, so the way that the kind of wings develop, and also the eyes, like the kind of structure of the eyes. So that's like one type of research. So there's kind of in vivo research. There's also a lot of in vitro research, biophysical stuff. So I think it's also very much becoming an interdisciplinary field. So for our fourth year projects, you won't just have opportunities within the Department of Biochemistry. You could do pharmacology, chemistry, even physics. So
Okay,
I'm really interested in biophysics and like structural biology and the kind of techniques for that. So I think it's a very, very broad field.
cool.
And then obviously careers wise, I think you can basically go into many different areas, whether
Yeah,
that be kind
sure.
of more sciencey and research and development for pharma companies, whether that's just actual academic research or even just like finance or law and like
Yeah,
the kind of
sure,
typical
sure,
kind of more
sure.
corporate jobs, I guess.
Yeah, cool. And so you've said it's really really broad. And that's something you like. Is there any advice you have for people comparing it to like say chemistry or physics or like or biology straight? Because like from what I've heard it described, it's like kind of like the chemistry of biology in a way. Is that like an accurate way of putting it? And like why is it being really broad, like a positive as opposed to just like oh my goodness, there's so many options. What do I do?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to touch
Yeah,
on that
yeah.
for a bit? And then, yeah.
So I did actually go to the course thinking it was the chemistry of biology,
Okay.
which to an extent it is. But as a first year, everything's kept very separate. I'm doing a module on physics, a module on maths, two on biology, and then one on chemistry. And at the moment, they're not joining together, which they might do that in second year more.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it's broad in the sense that you're dipping your toes into many different fields, but I wouldn't say it's exactly the chemistry of biology.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what you define as biochemistry is kind of quite difficult. And I think it's also something that changes with like research
Right.
development as
Yeah.
well. So I think like in terms of like if I were choosing a course, a lot of people in the department might have started off doing like an undergrad in physics or chemistry and then transitioned. So I think like yes, it's very broad, but also if you want to be like even broader, biochemistry is definitely something that people can transition into later. Whereas going from biochemistry into like obviously like some really hardcore physics wouldn't be
Yeah.
possible. So I think like for me, like I knew that I was kind of interested in the biochemistry side of things. Like I didn't just want to do random, not random reactions, but
Yeah.
reactions that weren't biologically relevant. Um, I think it's got a good amount of chemistry in. I think like something that was important to me was that I chose a course where there was enough like chemistry in it, I guess, to some extent. Like I think a lot of universities kind of if you like because I looked at biochemistry as well when I was applying in sixth form,
Yeah.
and some have more biology content, some have more chemistry content. And I was also a bit worried going into second year that it was going to be a bit more like cellular level. So we kind of talk about cellular and so the degree here is actually called molecular and cellular
Okay.
biochemistry. So that's the kind of two levels, and cellular is that kind of more like micro size of like cell signaling, how cells interact, the structure of that extracellular matrix. So that's like the space between cells.
Okay.
Whereas like molecular is more looking at like enzymes, kinetics, and that probably is the more kind of chemistry side of things. So you do kind of do quite a bit of that and more than I was expecting even into second year. So I think in first year, because you have that kind of split, you kind of think, okay, so after first year, I'm just going to be doing molecular and cellular. Is it going to be none of that with the
Yeah.
on knowledge kind of, is that any of that going to be relevant? But it definitely is. And you definitely still look at things like organic mechanisms, which I really like. Like that's the side that I'm interested in, the molecular
Cool.
side.
So you're almost sort of drawing together loads of different areas of science and applying them to life. Is that a good way of putting it? Like it's not just biology and chemistry, but it's all these different areas of scientific study that you can kind of combine to this one like big focus area.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd
Cool.
say
Nice
so.
one. That
Yeah.
sounds really interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
But sorry, I do have to say that with Oxford, I think it's a little bit different from the majority of universities
Okay.
since I've always wanted to go into biochem. I researched biochem to
Right.
go to
Got it. Got
uni.
it. Got it.
And the majority of courses were very chemistry, biology heavy, probably more biology heavy. The majority of modules were biology, biology, biology. Whereas with Oxford, they are so much more broad.
Yeah.
The majority of universities don't have a core module which is physics. So I definitely think that that's one of the advantages of Oxford, and it does make it slightly different.
Yeah. Okay. So ca apart from that, because obviously you've put a lot of time into thinking about different universities, how can you give us a brief? Is that basically is that the only difference for Oxford? Were there other universities that you were really strongly considering? Like, what would if you hadn't got into Oxford, where would you have gone? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it was actually very close between Oxford and UCL,
Right.
but for completely different reasons.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned with Oxford, it's very broad, covers all bases, but at the same time, it doesn't give you any choice. Like in first
Okay.
year, no optional modules. I believe
Oh
in
wow.
second year,
Right.
there's only two that you can choose for.
So in second year, we share some supplementary subjects with other science subjects. So you can take either quantum chemistry, history of and philosophy of science, chemical pharmacology, and crystallography. I'm currently doing quantum chemistry because that's just something that is so like I just know that at no other university doing
Right.
biochemistry would I get the because this quantum chemistry module is an extra for the chemists.
Okay.
So like it really is in depth and it really is something that like I find that challenges and stretches
Yeah.
me.
Sure.
And is it necessarily like biologically relevant? No. But it's just really nice to do something a bit different. So like my lectures this time have been like on like I've just started group theory and like operators and commutators. and especially because I did like further maths A level,
Yeah.
I just like to keep my maths up.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you said, like other than that, there is no like you don't get to choose any modules or anything, which is probably the biggest difference. I don't think there's any other university where you get literally no options at all.
Then on the other hand, obviously you've got the research in the fourth year, so that's almost like the opposite end of the spectrum, right? You've been like constrained, and then you get to just kind of do what you
Choose
want.
whatever you want.
Although I have to say the majority of universities do that.
Right, okay.
It's not exactly an Oxford unique thing, is the integrated
Yeah.
masters on the end of it. But that was what I liked about UCL, is all the options. Perhaps
Right.
too many
Yeah,
options.
sure.
But they go a lot more into the niche. So you've got your core modules, not as broad as Oxford, but then you get to choose, I think, 3 or 4 optional modules a year. And I'm quite interested in circadian rhythms and coding, and those sort of more niche aspects you could pick.
Okay.
Whereas it's quite sad that you don't get that in Oxford, but at the same time, as you mentioned with the fourth year, you have the chance to specialise then. So it's not like you're missing out, you're just doing it in a bit of a different order.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
and I
actually
don't think the
understand
lack of option is like a massive issue. I think it is that like I can't compare to other
that.
universities,
Yeah, of course,
obviously,
yeah.
but I think that like we actually just do go into depth in quite a lot of topics. Like whenever I look at the options of other, because I like tutor, so I'm helping people pick
Yeah,
universities,
yeah,
pick biochemistry if they want to, etc. It's like not that any of the options aren't what we'd cover here. Like we would cover most of them to some degree. Like you might go a bit more in depth, but I think the fact is that like I think it's a very much a research kind of focused degree in a way, and they
yeah.
want to prepare you to go into any form of research that you might be interested in. And so they do just cover like most grounds. And I think there's a lot of things as well that online that you won't particularly see looking at the module names. I think it's very limited what you get online. Like you'll see, oh, in second year you do like there's a module called toolboxes of biochemistry. Like what does that mean?
Okay.
So I think like it's definitely difficult to actually know what you're doing. But like to speak on quite a broad level, like I think we do cover a lot of things,
Yeah, okay.
all the way from kind of computational coding to like wet lab, like this it's quite diverse.
Okay, cool. So talk to me about labs, because I know for STEM stuff, it's a big part of your degree. I'm a PPE, I have nothing to do with that. So how do they work? Are they useful? Are they just a pain? Yeah, talk to me about labs.
Well, labs are very long and on a Friday, so
Okay.
already not in the good books.
Yeah.
No, we basically get there. We have a lecture beforehand, 9 to 10. Then we get in there 10 till 5. Sometimes we do end earlier though. And we basically get a couple of experiments on a sheet of paper, steps to do it, reagents, all of that, and then we essentially have to follow it, which isn't too bad. It's quite nice when you have a good lab partner. You can have a chat, get it done. But the real difficulty with labs is honestly the write up. The write ups themselves aren't hard, but if your results are a little bit off or your calculation is a figure or two out, your score dips and you have to redo it. And yeah, it's an
So will you
absolute
be
pain.
redoing it on the same day or just?
Yeah, not redoing the experiment, redoing the
Oh,
write-up,
got it.
and
Yeah.
it just drains so many hours that you don't have.
I think in first year you get like a week to do the write-up. Is it a week to do the write-up?
What do you mean we don't get a week later on?
Like well, after the experiment, don't you have a week to submit the
Yeah.
write-up? Yeah, so like oh no you do, but it's
Okay,
just
good.
very labs just change a lot in biochemistry from first year to second
Right.
year. So in first year it's very much like sporadic. Like one week you'll be doing one kind of experiment and then the other week you'll be doing something completely different and
Yeah.
it's not integrated. And that's the biggest difference between the first and the second year. So in the first year, you will wake up and you'll do like a like lecture on biophysical chemistry, then you'll do like organic chemistry, then you'll be looking at like cellular signaling,
Okay.
and then you'll do like a lab doing something completely different. Whereas in second year, you have a completely different structure. So everything's organized into teaching blocks that focuses on a particular biochemical question each week. And so you've got kind of five kind of key kind of topic areas, and then with each of them, there's about eight subtopic kind of questions.
Okay.
So for example, this week mine was it's kind of broad, but it's like how do cells do chemistry? So my labs are all about that. My all of the work I've been doing this week is actually just focusing on that one kind of topic question. Whereas in first year you don't get that at all. It's just you're doing like everything all at once and trying to juggle it.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that's really nice about second year is that you actually can just take the time and focus on things in a lot of detail. And the labs that you're doing are so much more relevant to what you're
Yeah,
learning,
Yeah.
yeah.
which is so nice. Like, you know, I've been learning about kind of enzymes and drug design this week, and then that was directly linked to my lab that I was doing. So I actually see kind of how the research methods are integrated. Whereas in first year, it's just not
No.
like that at all.
No, half the experiments I'm doing, I don't know the science behind it.
Right.
And it's a little bit difficult to understand what you're doing and do it correctly when you don't know what you're looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah, in first year, I think definitely like the write-ups is where you understand what you've been doing. Like you kind of go in on a Friday morning, like you follow the protocol, you kind of have like a rough idea what's going on, and then you do the write-up, and that's when you actually understand what you did. Whereas in second year, you go into it like you've been doing lectures on this all week. You've got a much better idea of what you're actually looking for, what you're doing, and the kind of write-up submission process is also completely different. So you just kind of usually have like a post-practical quiz on Canvas, and you just kind of
Mm.
upload what you got on your results, and it's a lot more. I don't know. I personally find it a lot easier. I found that the write-ups in first year are really time consuming, um, whereas like this year it's been a lot nicer.
Yeah, sure. And then outside of labs, what kind of contact hours, that sort of thing do you have? How many lectures? How many tutorials? What does that look like?
So in first year, there is a lot of work, lots of contact hours. Some days I have 5 to 6 lectures.
Wow.
Like the minimum amount of lectures I have is 2 a day. I think probably my worst day was when I had 2 tutorials and 5 lectures, which meant about
Oh
3 hours
my
of tutorials.
goodness.
Sorry, and 5 hours of lectures, and yeah, it almost killed me off. But don't get me wrong, they're fun. They're very interesting, but it's
Be a bit
a lot
much.
to
Yeah.
balance. Because last week I had 4 worksheets and 2 essays due, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely changes in second year. I think you're still busy, but it's more independent to some extent. So typically, and again, because you're focusing on a different question each week, you have a lot more variation in how busy you'll be. So at the beginning of the term, I was doing like the toolboxes modules, which is what we're assessed on next term. But we'll talk about assessment
Yeah.
later, I
Yeah.
imagine. But basically, that was like really intense. Like I had like 3 labs a week. Like I was in the lab basically all day. I was doing like quite a few lectures as well. Whereas like last week I had like I think 7 lectures, which is actually not a lot,
No, it's not
but
much at
like
all.
yeah, in the whole week, which was quite nice. And then I had one lab, but it was a computer lab, and I just did that in my own time. So even though we had a schedule kind of slot for that on Thursday, I just did it on Monday, got it out of the way. I think you've got that kind of flexibility. And then I'll have like around 1 to 2 tutorials a week, depending, probably on average one.
Okay.
Mm.
But like for example, next week I've got two, so it just
Fine.
depends.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Um, so that sounds like you're getting, well, I suppose also as you get to second year, you know how to do things a bit more. You're more used to it. But it sounds like first year is a bit crazy,
Yes.
and then second year it gets a bit more sensible.
Yeah, I'd say so. And then like in terms of like the tutorial work, like you're used to it, like you know how
Yeah,
to
yeah,
approach a
for sure.
problem
Yeah,
sheet.
yeah.
I think as well, like so what I was told was that second year was going to be like more essays, but I found that it's still quite a lot of problem sheets
Right.
really. It's just that our problem sheets aren't necessarily going to be always like the most like mathematical. Like sometimes it will just be like short answer questions. It
Yeah,
really depends and varies a lot from topic to topic.
sure.
But there's definitely a big focus on data in second year, I think, like how what methods can you use? How do you analyze the data from those methods? At least that's what I found so far.
Cool.
Um, so yeah, I think definitely like geared towards research.
And then you mentioned assessment, and we may as well talk about that now. So, what are we looking at when you're getting assessed? Do your labs count towards anything in terms of that? And then obviously you sit papers, right? So how does that look?
Do you want to talk about first year first?
Yeah. So we have something called collections and prelims,
Yeah.
which collections you come back to at the start of every new term, sit them and kind of see where you are. These don't count towards your grade, whereas prelims at the end of the year, well, again, they don't count towards your grade, but it does give you kind of a prediction of whereabouts you are.
So is that your mocks,
Yeah,
effectively?
basically like
Okay.
mocks. So nothing from year one counts towards your final grade, whereas I believe in year two there are practical exams which count towards your grade. But of course, you can speak more on that. But yeah, in general, in first year, it's more about finding your feet and just getting the content down in your mind.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
First is very much like preparatory in the
Yeah.
sense that like they throw a lot at you because not a lot is going to make sense in second year if you don't have those kind of core concepts. So yeah, you do your prelims. So in first year, the first 2 terms, you're kind of taught. I think this is something that is quite different from other subjects, is that in the third term we basically have no teaching,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
pretty much just revision for our prelims, which were in week 7. I think usually they're in week 7.
Okay.
Um, you think that 6 weeks is like a lot of time to revise. I was literally like panicking right up until the prelims. And you sit 5 papers at the end of first year. So you do maths, physical chemistry, organic chemistry, molecular and cellular. So they kind of call them different names, but that's kind of the
Yeah, sure.
idea. The maths paper is weighted slightly less. So it's got like a 66% weighting and the rest
Right.
have got 100%
Yeah.
weighting. And then it's just kind of normal, like 70 over as distinction. It's only pass or distinction for prelims.
Right.
So you don't get like a 2-1, 2-2 breakdown. I think that's the same with most other subjects
Yeah.
here. So yeah, that's kind of again doesn't count towards your final grade, but it's like a good indicator of how you're doing. And then second year we have biochemistry is quite unique in that we don't have the same kind of end of year exam structure that a lot of science subjects here have. So we have TSAs, which is terminally summative assessments. So you have 5 modules in second year and third year, which is like toolboxes, cellular chemistry, molecular processes, the cell in time and space, and information transfer. Toolboxes is what you're assessed on throughout the whole kind of 2 years before your finals.
Got it.
So at the beginning of every term, you have an exam called the TSA, which is a terminally summative assessment. It's computer based, it's short answer questions, and you basically, I haven't done my first one yet,
Okay.
but it will be on toolboxes 1 and 2
Yeah.
next term, which is what I studied at the beginning of this term. And then the 2 that you do in second year are weighted 3% each for your degree.
Okay.
And then the 2 in second year are 4.5% each. So from all those TSAs and the toolboxes kind of content, that's 15% of your
Okay.
degree.
So that's not
Then
insignificant, but at the same time, it's like,
it's kind of annoying because you're like, oh, it's only 3%, so it doesn't
yeah,
count, but then
yeah,
it actually
it
will add
does.
up.
Yeah.
I think people tend to do well on the TSAs.
Okay.
Like our tutors always like the average mark for the first one's like already over 70.
Right.
It's quite a kind of because you've got the time to revise for it. And they're always in week 1 of every term,
Hmm.
which is also quite nice because it means you get a nice free trinity in second
Yeah.
year, pretty much.
Oh, that's lovely.
And then you have your finals in third year,
Yeah.
which I think are like 45% maybe, and then the research year and the last year's 40, I
Okay.
think.
So do you actually sit in the examinations at the end of the fourth year, or is it literally you do your exams in Trinity of third year? That's the final term for those who don't know. The final term of third year, and then you do your research, and that's it.
Pretty much. So in your fourth year, you do research where you have to write a kind of mini thesis.
Right.
I think you have to do a review article as well on like an area of biochemistry. As far as I'm aware, there's not any written exams unless you decide to take a supplementary subject. So the supplementary subjects, you can take one in your second, third, or fourth year. If you get a pass in it, you get a whole extra 0.5% on
Oh
your degree.
wow.
And if you get a distinction, you get 1%. And you can only get one of that for like one supplementary subject. So even if you wanted to do one every year, you could only get a maximum of 1% from
Oh,
them.
okay.
So they're not particularly like useful for like boosting your grade or
It's just
anything.
interesting if
They're
you're.
more just
Yeah.
interesting areas.
I suppose that gives you a little bit more flexibility as well, because you're saying that there's not much choice, but if you've
Yeah.
got these supplementaries, then that adds at least a tiny little bit of variety in.
Definitely, and they're so diverse from what you'd kind of study. So from what I've heard, pharmacology is kind of like the go-to
Right.
because it's got a lot of shared content with our normal kind of course. Things like crystallography, that and like quantum, that's more if you're into like physical
Hmm.
chemistry. If you're into organic, then you can do aromatics and heterocyclics.
Okay.
And then if you're into like, philosophy and history of science, then you can take that.
Yeah, cool.
So I think they are just a way to do something a bit different because you can get very caught up in the biochemistry that you're doing and you can get kind of just forget that actually like there are broad applications as well.
Cool. So I think we've got quite a good overview of the course, but I just have like one like final question about the course before we move on to like more assessment, not assessment, admissions focused stuff. What is the coolest thing that you've learned so far in biochemistry? Do you want to go first, Ari, and then Lexi?
Well, I'm very interested in drug discovery, as I've
Yeah,
said. So
yeah.
I've got to say the lecture on cryo-EM X-ray crystallography has been my favorite so far
Okay.
because they were actually going into the science of how these techniques work and how that does apply to drug discovery. You know, I even went up to the lecturer afterwards and got a couple like website names to try this stuff out myself, like
Cool.
on a computer. So that was very cool.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more? Because you've used a lot of words that I don't
Oh, I'm
understand.
so sorry. Okay, so basically, with drug discovery and protein modeling, you have different techniques which essentially fire electrons or X-rays at the molecule, and which creates these diffraction patterns. So for each protein, you create thousands of these diffraction patterns, put them into a computer, and it gives you this electron density graph, which then you can create those like ribbon models that you've seen. Have you seen
I
any?
have not. I'm a
Okay.
PBist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, show us
Get
in the
one up, get
textbook.
one
Show us
up.
in the textbook.
Is it on like the front page of this one actually? Yeah, like you
Oh,
see those ribbons there, like
Okay.
those kind of protein structures that
yeah.
we work with.
Show us the camera
Oh
as well,
yeah,
because I'm there.
there. So there's protein structures on the front of this textbook, which is what we're trying to get so that we
Okay.
can model molecules which will fit into pockets in these structures, and then that's kind of the first few steps of drug discovery. And actually seeing how those techniques worked on a presentation was really, really cool because, you know, it's the best part of biochem, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. Cool, cool, cool. And then Alexi, what's the coolest thing you've learned?
Well, firstly, I'm going to say you do a lot of that in second year, so you're definitely like second year. For me, so this is something that kind of got me into biochemistry in the beginning anyway, was protein folding and like the protein folding problem,
Okay.
which is which was like a big kind of biochemical problem for years because if you think about if a protein had to sample every single conformation before it kind of reached its native fold, it would take longer than the length of the universe itself.
Okay.
So it's like, how is this a directed process?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm really into thermodynamics. And like a big question as well is how can this kind of be entropically favorable? Because you've got this big kind of polypeptide chain that's got a lot of conformation, it's got a lot of entropy.
Okay.
The entropy of the universe always has to increase.
Yeah.
So for this to kind of fold into this macromolecule that's kind of a much more stable structure, is kind of is like was a big problem.
Mm.
So learning about things like the hydrophobic effect, how like the expellation of water molecules actually increases entropy when the protein folds.
Okay.
Um, and you do a whole kind of in the biophysical kind of part of first year. There's a really good lecture series on actually like how proteins fold, how it's a
Mm.
directive process as well. So this idea of like a protein funnel and that it kind of folds through this kind of directed pathway to some extent. And also just learning like more generally about building on A level, because in A level biology you learn kind of about secondary tertiary structures, so alpha helices and beta sheets. So just learning like even more about that kind of process of folding and how that works, I think is like what was probably the most interesting thing to me. I'm just a massive proteins kind of
Yeah.
professor.
Yeah.
No,
So again, like
definitely.
the X-ray crystallography stuff is also really exciting because just how you actually get the structure of a protein, and that's something that we're focusing on quite a lot in second
Yeah.
year, is like
Cool.
because also how we kind of get these structures, how we get the proteins in the first place, because we can't just take protein out of a cell that easily, right? So actually what we usually do is we take the gene, we put it into another organism, then we take the protein, and actually how we purify it is quite interesting. So I won't go into too much detail, but
Yeah.
essentially, anyone that's interested in biochemistry, like the plasmids, we put those into a model organism, and that produces the protein. Within the plasmid, we can actually put tags on the protein itself.
Okay.
So quite a common thing that we do is we put kind of 6 histidines.
What's a histidine?
That's an amino acid.
Okay.
So all proteins are made of amino
Yeah.
acids. We put that at the beginning of the protein. So when it's expressed, it has this kind of, it's folded usually correctly because histidine usually doesn't have too much effect on the
Right.
kind of folding process. And this is then really cool because then you basically blend the cells up and you can put it through a column which has these kind of metal, I think it's nickel, NiNTA column, and then the histidine binds to that, and then you wash all the rest of the proteins away, and that's how you get your protein of interest. Then you
Cool.
like run it on a gel. This is the nice thing about second year is that like in first year you just learn everything in isolation, and then like I was learning about that, and then the next day I like went into the lab and actually did that experiment
Yeah.
and purified a protein. So I think like just the protein stuff is very
Yeah, that's
fun.
really cool that you're getting to do actually like real things. Like, because for me doing PPE, it's very much just like you learn about abstract ideas, but I'm not going out and conducting some economic research or, you might say I'm doing a bit of philosophy in that I'm, thinking of some new ideas, but I'm not I don't feel like I'm doing the actual process. Whereas for you guys, it's very much like you are really hands-on and I guess being trained up to do the research and to go through the real process of biochemistry. So that's really cool to hear.
So I didn't know the 40 actually had its separate weighting. I kind of just yeah, nobody explained that to me.
No, you literally don't know. Like it took me so long to find out how much each TSA is weighted. Because it's just so hard to find it
Yeah.
online. There's nothing about like the TSAs or like the actual assessment weighting,
Mm.
so
And
Yeah.
it's quite useful.
it's the same with the information in the modules because it tells you nothing. I did so much searching online and yeah,
You
tells you
can't find
nothing.
out anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it just a mystery until
Yes.
you turn up to the lecture
I,
or
I had no idea I was doing physics until I came to Oxford. It's
what?
like, I have a physics module. Because I thought physical biochemistry was like physical chemistry
Right.
of biology. So, yeah.
Yeah. The physical one's kind of weird because it's like a mix of like some physical things, some chemical things. Again, kind of just going back to like it's literally called physical biochemistry, and it's got a little bit of biology, chemistry, and physics that we're
Okay.
putting on. Like it's very. I mean, there's the textbook. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
um,
Who was it? Lecturer actually wrote the blue one.
Oh,
So,
nice one.
but yeah, Mark Wormel,
yeah, Mark
Mark
Wills.
King.
Nice.
No, he's really good.
So now that we've talked a lot about what the course actually is, and if people are still watching slash listening, it means they might want to actually um, get on the course. So, first question for you guys is what kind of person makes a good biochemist? What sort of qualities would make somebody suitable for this kind of course? Obviously, it's not like exhaustive. There would be exceptions, but what would you say? Like what things about you make you good at this and that you've seen in other people maybe?
Well, you can't be scared of rejection or failure
Okay.
because it's very difficult. There's a lot of the time when you're going to be sat at your desk just asking how, why, what, when.
Yeah.
So definitely have to be very curious, very okay with being wrong. So you don't be uncomfortable with being wrong. I think that's probably the most important thing. It's not so much a thing of you have to be extroverted, introverted, you need to be a specific type of person. It's more the qualities and attitude you bring with you.
Right. Means
Yeah, no, I think that's very true, especially in the lab. Like, your results are never. I remember in my first year, like, I did this DNA purification thing. I got like I think it was either 4,000 or 40,000% yield, which like
Is
is
that good or
not
bad?
good. It means
Okay.
it's a very, very impure
Right.
sample, like, not good at all. So I think, yeah, you need to, like, the gels that we've ran this year haven't been particularly great. So in terms of the lab side of things, you just need to be kind of, I think you need to have perseverance, and like
Yeah.
the labs is quite a tricky part of it. And then I think just generally, you probably need to just, if you're interested in biochemistry, definitely look into like all the different areas. Like, obviously, no one expects you to be interested in every single
Yeah,
area,
sure.
but definitely have a good idea of what you're getting into in terms of like what you're actually going to be studying, because it is quite diverse. I think there's a lot of areas, and the more you're interested in, the better.
Yeah.
And I think as well, like having some kind of. So I think there's some. I don't think you need to be particularly mathematical or particularly good at any particular area of science. But I think if you've got quite a broad grounding in all of the sciences, then it's a really good
Yeah.
subject for that. But alternatively, like you don't need to be like excellent at any one particular area necessarily. So like I think maths is something that comes up a lot because like
Yeah.
technically like you don't have to have A-level math to do the
Right.
course here, but if you've got it, then it's like quite a disadvantage because most of the first year maths is kind of just A-level
Yeah.
Yeah.
maths.
Yeah.
But again, like if you're interested enough, that's not going to be an issue. So
Yeah.
I think it's just really having that passion to some extent.
Cool. Nice one. Um, and then did you have any kind of misconceptions about the course going into it? Anything that you're like, wow, I was so wrong about that, and that you think would be useful to people to know about so they don't kind of go in with the same misconceptions?
Well, I always thought, because I knew about worksheets beforehand, that I thought you did the content in the lecture, you had the worksheet, and it'd be like A levels that, oh, this is the same question we covered in class. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I know how to do this.
Yeah.
No, they throw you in the deep end. Half the stuff on those worksheets you have not covered in lectures and you never will. And you
Okay.
have to go away, read the textbook,
Yeah.
and figure out how to do it yourself. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the separation between subjects, I expected it a lot more to be tying things together, where instead of just doing pure chemistry, pure physics, which isn't necessarily a disadvantage. I definitely think that it's going to work out for the best in the end, but it took me by surprise.
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, I think lost my train of thought. I don't know what I think. Alexi, hopefully you have some thoughts.
Uh, Misconceptions. Yeah, I think a big thing that is different from school, as you've kind of touched on, is the fact that you aren't just going to get a worksheet where you work through it and it's everything you covered in
Mm,
class, and you haven't got one singular textbook which gives you all the answers. So you need to be drawing across many sources, like reading articles. I think, yeah, it's just also like not necessarily a misconception, but it's really hard. Like university is genuinely difficult.
yeah.
Like it always kind of shocks. I don't know why it shocked me so much, but like I think, I kind of from A levels, a lot of people tell you like actually university is easier than A levels. And maybe it is for certain courses or in certain places, but I found doing biochemistry here specifically that that just isn't the case.
Yeah.
Like I did quite an intense sixth form, so I did 5 A levels,
Five. Oh
and
my
I thought that
goodness.
like no matter what happens at uni, like I'm gonna like surely it can't get worse than that, and it actually did. Like it genuinely was so difficult the
Okay,
work.
worse than five A levels.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I think just actually, and like yeah, like you said, like you're not gonna know things and you're gonna make mistakes all the time. So that for me, I think was probably the biggest like misconception slash culture shock
Yeah.
coming here. It was like I'm actually just not gonna know anything ever, and I'm gonna feel stupid. But it's okay because I'm learning and it's
Yeah.
like
Mm.
nice.
Yeah, and on your what you guys were saying about how all the information is like spread out all over the place, that you get like a third of it, half of it in lectures, and then one textbook will give you a quarter, and then you've got to look at like three different textbooks for the remaining little bit. It's like I found that really weird as well because I expect to just read a textbook and everything's covered. That's not what it's like at all. It can be kind of frustrating when you spend 2 hours reading through a textbook and then you get to the end of it and you still can't answer a bunch of questions. But I guess that's just something that you get used to. And I think already got used to an extent, just having to go to lots of different sources and not expecting everything to be in that one book or in that one lecture.
Or even just like easy to find. Because
Yeah,
like when you've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
exactly.
lecturers, like the research that they might be doing might be like really niche, but
Yeah.
they might
Yeah.
include it in their lecture slides because they obviously think it's
Mm,
interesting,
yeah.
which is great. And then you go to read about it and you're like, oh wait, there's literally like two articles, one of which was written by the lecturer on this particular topic.
Yeah.
And then you kind of get a bit stuck and you're like, oh my gosh, like even ChatGPT can't help me. Even ChatGPT doesn't know anything about this. And then you've got to like really, I think it does then force you to think like a scientist and actually kind of be curious and think, kind of draw things together and use your brain yourself, which is something that I think like the learning process kind of, especially from A levels, kind of you get decentralized from actually thinking from yourself for yourself.
Yeah.
Because you like, especially for like science, I think like you can just kind of rote learn from the
Yeah.
textbook. Yeah, you need to have some kind of basic analysis skills, but I think it's very different in the sense that like, oh, I have to use my brain so much
Mhm.
actually, which is a good thing, right? It's really
Mm.
nice and it's really rewarding, but it's difficult too.
Yeah. So picking up on what you said about AI, I'm interested how useful. I don't know if you've had to use ChatGPT. I assume so. I mean, I think most students have. How useful is it? What kind of use cases are there for it in your degree? I know they did some protein folding stuff using AI.
Yeah, that was AlphaFold.
Yeah.
AlphaFold and Rosetta.
Okay. Cool. But yeah, so obviously that's a kind of separate thing. But on the university side of things, how do you use it, and is it useful even? Because you're saying like some things is almost so niche that ChatGPT can't even help.
Yeah, I think it can be useful to an extent. I think it's kind of hard. I think in first year I used it a lot just for like kind of proof checking
Yeah.
like problem sheets.
Okay.
Especially if like or like my lab calculations. Like sometimes I would do the calculation and then I would just run it by ChatGPT. And sometimes it's good as well because it forces you to kind of be very rigorous.
Mm.
So maybe it would come back and say something and I would say, well, actually no, because I already did that step. Or what
Yeah.
about this? So I think like it's something where you can't just put your problem sheet in as a
Yeah.
PDF and let it give you the answers. You need to be challenging it, but
Yeah.
it can be such a useful tool just for checking little things, like especially for example, like this quantum chemistry that I'm doing. it's such a self-directed module. Like you don't get a lot of lecture content, and the textbooks are really difficult to comprehend. So actually, just having something to speak to and be like, can
Yeah,
you break this down even
yeah.
further for me? Especially as well because it's extra for the chemists. I don't have like necessarily all of the prerequisite knowledge that would be most
Yeah,
useful
yeah,
for
yeah.
me. So I think in that regard, it's quite useful.
So it's kind of like a mini tutor and a quality assurance kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, definitely like the quality assurance. Like before I submit something generally out, just like if it was like quite challenging, I'll just
Mm,
run it through.
cool. And that, I guess, will hopefully elevate the quality of your work pretty consistently because it's making you think about it more. And as you're saying, be a bit more rigorous because if it misunderstands it, then it probably means there's some ambiguity or whatever. So it could be quite a good way to yeah, just level it up a bit. So I want to, in the last sort of 15 minutes, talk about emissions specifically. And I know that you guys don't have an admissions test. So for me, it was very much just like do well on the admissions test, then you get an interview, do well on the interview, then you get a place. You don't have the admissions test. How do you make your personal statement stand out so that you get to interview? Because it's quite a competitive course, isn't it, to get onto?
It was 11% admissions in my
Okay,
year.
yeah, so that's very competitive then.
Yeah.
How do you make yourself stand out on the personal statement?
Well, I have to say, have the basics like a good reference, good grades, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But in your actual personal statement, I think a good introduction is the be all and end all a
Right,
little bit.
okay.
Because, like, they read so many personal statements every year that if you bore them to death in the first three
Yeah, yeah,
sentences,
yeah.
they're not reading any further. So I wrote mine a bit more like a story, like a narrative, and then had it as good introduction, college, work experience, and wrote it like Oxford was going to fit into my story and be part of my story. So I created a story gap. So I said, I have this, that, and the other. I'll bring this to the board, but at the same time, without you, I can't reach my goals.
Right.
That was kind of the vibe of my personal statement. And then at the end, I actually wrote in my conclusion, I will be an asset to you for X, Y, and Z,
Cool.
which is cocky, but I think it
Yeah,
made me
it shows you're
stand out a little
confident.
bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I gave them reasons as to why they would want me, not just saying you're going to help me,
Yeah.
if
So it's
that
like
makes
more of a
sense.
reciprocal thing than
Yeah.
just I want a place at your university.
Yeah. And
Cool.
I would also say bait them.
Okay.
Like you're gonna you're gonna get through to interview, like if you get through to interview, you don't want to give them a completed personal statement. You don't want to give them something where it's like, oh, I know this kid, I know she's done this, that, and the other, and I know exactly everything about what she's written. Instead, what you want to do is kind of drop in an interesting experience or an interesting fact here and there that the tutors can go, oh, she's not elaborated, but I'd want to know more about
Yeah.
that. And then in your interview, it kind of tricks them into wanting to interview you.
Yeah.
So you can elaborate it there. So I've got to say, I did bait my interviewers a lot
You
in my
basically
personal
made a
statement.
clickbait personal statement, basically.
Yes, I made a clickbait personal statement.
Nice one. And do you have any advice on like finding the balance? Because on the one hand, you don't want to be super superficial, but then on the other hand, you want to have something more to talk about. So did you have any like ways of thinking about it, or was it just very much you just do lots of drafts and find the sweet spot?
A bit of both because I did 37 drafts.
Oh my
But
goodness.
here's where it gets interesting. 2 days before the deadline, I showed it to my teacher. She told me in very polite terms that it was absolutely awful.
Okay.
Made me rewrite it all the weekend before the 16th, which was my submission date.
Yeah.
And yeah, I submitted it without any extra feedback. But in terms of striking the balance between superficial and deep, I would say pick one book, one experience, and one fact, like one area which you want to go into detail with.
Okay.
So split it into 3 sections. So one book I chose Breathless by David Quammen, which was all about COVID. So
Okay.
I talked about virology and, sprinkled in the fact I'd done a little bit of work experience. Didn't really elaborate on that
Yeah.
though, but I did elaborate on the book. In terms of a work experience, I chose protein crystallography at Diamond Light Source. I went
Right.
into detail about the techniques I used, what I found about it, what fascinated me, and then I drew it back to a couple of the projects I'd looked at in A levels. And so, yeah, in that sense, pick a main thing and use evidence to support that. So it's not just I did one thing and all this extra stuff, but don't go into detail about the extra
Yeah,
stuff.
got it. Okay, that's useful.
So it's, I would say, 40-60. 40% should be in depth, 60% should be baiting your interview.
Okay, cool. And then I'll come to you in a second, Alexi, but how did that lead into your interview experience? Like, did you, because for me, I did a relatively similar thing. For me, it was just making very blatant opinions. inviting my interviewer to like say that's a very out there claim. Talk to me about it, and I almost certainly from one of my interviews, I almost felt like I pre-structured the interview because of the way that I baited them, if you want to put it like that. So how did that then affect your interview experience?
Well, one of my interviews was completely their script,
Right.
not really many questions to me apart from what is biochemistry, why do you want to do it?
Right.
But then the other interview, it was a lot more around my personal statement, which at one point I wrote a fact about something and then said, this prompted me to think, what happens next? And then that was literally a question they asked me. They said, you said, what happens next? So what happens next
Okay.
then? So they asked me a lot of questions like that. They asked
Had
me.
you found out what happens next?
I had theories.
You had theories.
I had
Okay.
theories.
Okay.
I think they appreciated the fact that I had theories instead of just going, I don't know. But they also asked a lot about my EPQ.
Okay.
Like there was a solid 15 minutes. Half the interview was spent on my EPQ, since that was a big chunk of my personal statement. But yeah, just bait your interviewers. They'll ask you the questions you want to be asked.
Cool. Nice one. And Alexei, obviously you had a slightly different way in. So do you have any advice? If you don't, that's fine. But
No, I mean, I think like generally in personal statement, like what you said, like I had quite a strong opening. So like obviously I won't go into too much detail, of course, because I'm not doing law anymore. But
yeah.
like I had, I'd done all STEM subjects, and then I was applying for something that was not related. So I kind of addressed that straight away. And I think just kind of I set mine like around books that I'd read pretty much. Then obviously the interview was just all those stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, just generally, I think in the interview, just being kind of open-minded and things like that. And then when I switched,
What was that process like? Did you just say, I
yeah,
want to switch? And then like, okay.
it's kind of, I think it's definitely something that varies from college to college
I
and
bet.
like how easily you can switch. Like, I know some people from other colleges that have managed to switch degrees. My biggest concern was having to take a year out because I know that if you switch too late, like I'd heard that it was quite common for most colleges to say that's fine, but like you'll have to start with the next cohort next year, which I knew that I didn't want to do
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I'd
yeah.
already done a gap year and like I was just ready to start university. So what the process kind of looked, I guess by like week 3 of law, again, it's not that I wasn't interested in law. I just kind of missed science and wanted to go back into it and then study law later. So I just spoke to the like senior tutor at the college about it. She's lovely here. If you haven't met her, Helen. I just spoke to her about kind of how I was feeling. Obviously, like going to university is like a big thing, and like I was like, I just feel like I've made a mistake. I don't know what to do. Um, discuss the options, discuss kind of, what my A-level grades were, what I might want to study instead. I went straight away with biochemistry because I kind of knew. And then there
And
was
do you think that helped you being quite decisive about what you wanted to do, or would that not make any difference?
I think like to some degree it was probably useful in the sense that, you know, what they could have said was okay, like obviously there's so many different options for like changing or suspending your studies. They might have said, do you want to like rusticate to think about it,
Yeah.
something like that. Um, but I kind of just thought I just knew like that's what I wanted to do. I kind of had considered other things, but I just thought, yeah, biochemistry is like the reason I want to switch is because I miss STEM, so it
Yeah.
makes sense for me to go into
Yeah.
either biochemistry or chemistry. And then I think that they went and had kind of conversations about me with tutors. I had to meet the biochemistry tutor, like kind of like explain my reasoning to some extent, like just make sure that I was not just going to switch and then want to switch back again
Yeah.
straight away,
Yeah.
right? And there's a lot of admin associated with it as well in terms of like actually transferring me, entering me for like the right exams, all of that. Because I was kind of preparing for mods when I was doing law. Um, and then yeah, by about I think it was week 5 or 6 on a Wednesday, I just got like the go ahead, like, okay, start going to biochem lectures, start going to their tutes. I didn't really get a proper kind of handover from my law tutors
Okay.
because I didn't particularly discuss it with them because I didn't want to bring it up until it had been confirmed. But then
Yeah.
by the time it had been confirmed, it was like a very quick process. So I think it's a process that definitely varies a lot from like college to college. I don't think it's particularly easy to switch. Um, necessarily. So obviously you don't want to
Yeah. Pick the right
obviously
degree. Pick the
don't
right degree.
apply with like the intention of switching. It's not going to work out. But like if you do like get to university and feel like uncomfortable with your degree, then like that's okay. Like there's other people I think in my year that had also switched, probably between more similar courses.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I spoke to the tutor. Like I knew basic biochemistry. Like with my A-level grades, they were kind of happy for me
Yeah.
to switch without doing too much like of like a formal interview. I don't know if that would have differed
Mm.
had it been a bit different. But yeah,
Cool.
that's how that happened.
Yeah, I mean, it works out obviously so far, so that's good. And just finally, I want to touch on like internships, work experience stuff because you've mentioned that in the personal statement you brought that up.
Mm.
I know for a lot of the careers stuff, it's very much like get an internship, get a return offer. That's my experience of it. Is that similar in biochemistry? How important is the work experience to your personal statement? And what like Alexi, would you say are you looking now for internships? Is that even a consideration for most biochemists? What does that look like?
So yeah, I think it is definitely. The department, we kind of, in terms of research, the department has some kind of funding available for second years to do research in the
Hmm.
department. So that's something that we kind of had a session on. Some third years came and spoke about what internships they did in the end of their second year. Um, in terms of like research, it is just like the two issues are funding and finding a PI that will take you on.
Yeah,
So a PI is like a principal investigator, so someone that runs a research group. So you can do that in Oxford or elsewhere. There are other kind of like scholars programs where you can do research at other institutions as well. So from the research side of things, that I think that's like fairly common. And if you're sure you want to go into research, a lot of people do that.
yeah.
Um, Also like kind of like companies like Oxford Nanopore quite close by. I actually did some user testing for them and they said like we do internships as well. So I think some people go there as well. Um, Obviously for me, because I'm looking at pivoting into
Yeah,
law,
yeah.
I'm currently applying for like law internships
Okay,
and
right,
grad
right, right.
schemes. So that's kind of where I'm heading. But I think um kind of in your second, the good thing about a 4 year degree is that there really isn't a rush. I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about internships till like
Hmm.
third, fourth
Yeah,
year.
yeah,
I
yeah.
also
Makes
know a
sense.
guy that like interned somewhere in second year, really liked it, and has just gone back there every year, I think, after then. So um, there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of different
Cool.
things that you can do with it, basically.
And then are there any societies that kind of help with that, or I don't know, is there a biochemistry society or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a chemistry and biochemistry
Right.
society. There's also like a biotech society, a biosynthesis society,
Bioengineering.
bioengineering. There's yeah, synthetic biology. Like there's so
Okay,
many
so there's
different
loads
things,
basically.
and they often have people coming in and doing talks and careers talks. So I think that there's definitely a lot of like opportunities in the kind of bio area right
Yeah.
now. It's definitely a very developing kind of area. Um, so yeah, I think there's just
There's
kind of a lot
lots
of
of opportunities basically.
opportunities,
Cool.
and it's kind of up to you, kind of yeah, what you want to do
Yeah,
with the
making the most
degree.
of what's available to you. Right. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Um, but thank you very much, both of you, for coming on. It's good to talk to you. I think I know a lot more about biochemistry now than I did an hour ago. So yeah, thanks very much for coming on. Thank you for watching, listening, and yeah, goodbye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of CourseCast. Contact details for our wonderful guests are available in the episode description. Contact them if you need application support. Sign up to our mailing list and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the links in the episode description to be kept in the loop, see behind the scenes content, and submit listener questions. See you next week.